We're excited that you're spending this time with us. So I'm gonna get ready to introduce Sebastian Rubino, and we have a wonderful opportunity to get just a different perspective on somebody with autism and how he sort of navigates through things and the things that maybe have been challenges, and specifically even more importantly, what's been a big help for him. So Sebastian, I'm going to let you take it away now.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you all for taking the time to hear me speak today. So, I'm Sebastian, and I'm an autistic self-advocate. I've been invited to speak after interviewing the staff at Pegasus for Pet Lifestyles magazine. Let me give you a little background about myself. So, I was diagnosed with Asperger's at 10 years old. However, I reject that term because the doctor Hans Asperger was found to be complicit with the Nazis during World War II, going as far as to send high support needs children to die while protecting the lower support needs people like myself. That represents everything that I stand against, as my goal in life is to unify and protect autistic people regardless of how their traits manifest. That is why I identify as autistic. When you look at me, you may not be able to tell that I'm autistic at first glance, but if you saw me as a child, your thoughts would probably change. I can hold a conversation and make friends until I was 10. I spoke only in echolalia, repeating lines from cartoons and movies to communicate until I was 8. It wasn't until I was 20 that I stopped speaking in a monotone. My earliest meltdown I can recall is when my grandparents took me to a Walmart that was different from the one we usually went to, and we had to leave the store because of that. I was sent to a segregated school because of aggression, although it was mainly verbal and not physical. I think part of the aggression came from my dad and I moving in with my stepmom, who was very domineering and controlling over me, and I didn't know how else to communicate my frustration. She has shaped a lot of the insecurities I developed growing up, but that is a topic for later. I started middle school in regular classes with an inclusion teacher, then declassified out of special ed entirely upon entering high school. I then went to college to study journalism. Like most autistic people I know, bullying can be a huge problem. Bullying was a huge problem for me growing up, but the worst of it was probably in college. Now, I could tell you straight up that college is not designed with autistic people in mind. There's a disability resource center, but at that time, my parents conditioned me not to be open about being autistic. They prefer to just pretend it didn't exist. As a result, I would mask, which means to hide your autistic nature and pretend to be neurotypical. That backfired on me, however, as I would pretend to be someone I wasn't. Because of my insecurities, I would pretend to be this tough figure, and it ended up scaring people away. The thing with me is that you have to be direct in order for me to understand what you're thinking and what you want. I could feel empathy at a very heightened level, but I won't know what it is that's bothering you unless you tell me. Also, I could be completely unaware of the things I say in the moment, like not having a filter, and many people would stop talking to me without explaining why, which caused a lot of frustration. I could tell you from experience that the worst kind of bullying when you're autistic is the subtle kind. When I would be physically bullied, at least I would know exactly what that person was trying to do and why. But when people give you the silent treatment, it feels like you're trapped in a maze. I kept asking myself, why are they doing this to me? It made me feel like I was losing my mind. In the first semester, I had 2 roommates who lived with me in the dorm, but during the second semester, they moved away. They lied and said that it was because the room was too small for 3 people, which was partially true since the room was meant for 2 people. However, in the second semester, I would constantly call them to hang out with no response. I kept making excuses to myself like they were busy, but really, they just didn't want to be around me and didn't want to hurt my feelings. Now, let me tell you, that is the worst thing you can do to an autistic person. We need the truth. We need directness, even if it hurts. I personally prefer hard truths over comfortable lies. Anyway, I forced them to talk at the end of the year, and they told me the truth. That was that they were afraid of me and didn't want to hurt my feelings. I was devastated. I think that was my first time going into a complete shutdown where I lost motor function and could barely move. It felt like my body became filled with bricks. Up to that point, I imagined getting an RV and traveling across the country with them because they gave me the impression that they were my friends. It sent me into depression for years. But that moment was very pivotal for me as it got me to realize the way that the outside world can really be. In the following years, I dated a girl who was autistic for 3 years. However, she had higher support needs than I did, and the only autistic people I met up to that point were people who were more like me. This girl needed help with a lot of things that came naturally to me, and eventually I left because I felt like I would have to take care of her when I had trouble taking care of myself. Also, our personalities were so different that it seemed we just lost that spark. I preferred someone who would motivate me to be more ambitious in life, not someone who just wants everything to stay the same. After leaving her, I had an argument with my stepmother, which basically changed my life from that point forward. One day, she told me that I shouldn't disclose that I'm autistic at work, saying that it's something medical like cancer. I asked her, why do you compare it to cancer? And she said that autism is a terrible disease and needs to be cured. And I said, that is the most evil thing you've ever said. And she told me about her cousin who was autistic and was in diapers as a teenager. She said she was suffering because of it. So I said, the only suffering we face is people like you who can't accept us for who we are. It kept going back and forth from there, but that argument ended my relationship with her. At work, when my boss would leave, I would use my computer to research autism because I had no idea that autistic people like my stepmother described existed. My parents kept me sheltered from them. From what I found in my research, my point still stands. Autistic people, regardless of how their traits manifest, deserve to be respected, loved, and accommodated like everybody else. They are not broken, and they're perfect the way they are. To quote neurodiversity pioneer Jim Sinclair, autism is a way of being. It is not possible to separate the person from the autism. Therefore, when parents say, I wish my child did not have autism, what they're really saying is, I wish the autistic child that I have didn't exist, and I had a different, non-autistic child instead. I agree with Jim, as autism is an integral part of how I think and perceive the world. If my autism was taken from me, I would no longer be Sebastian. I'd be a different person with a different personality, experiences, and memories. To be honest, I imagine I'd be quite boring. That is why I was hurt when my stepmother told me I should be cured, because to me, it was her way of saying, I cannot accept you unless you fit into what I consider normal. Her actions toward me growing up certainly reflected that philosophy. With the research I was doing, I eventually discovered the neurodiversity movement. Neurodiversity means that people with different brains, such as autism, Down syndrome, ADHD, Tourette's, and schizophrenia, are people of equal value and deserving of the same rights as everyone else, rather than diseases to be eradicated. It was when I finally discovered that there was a whole community of people like me who are trying to make the world a better place for autistic people by making our voices heard instead of being kept in silence. The friends I made along the way got me to realize that I wasn't a broken neurotypical, but rather a complete autistic person. I discovered the way autistic people have been abused by society. I and everyone else I know in my community are working hard to bring that abuse to an end. We do this because we want to create a world for your children where they do not have to hide who they are, where they can stim and flap their hands freely, where they do not have to fear being abused or persecuted for the way they were born. That's because growing up, we didn't get to have that. But if we can make that happen for future generations, there's no greater accomplishment than that. We can't do this alone, though. That's why we need to unite with parents, because in order to help your children, we need you guys. I can't speak for all autistic people, but I and everyone else I know can offer a lot because of lived experience. We know firsthand what it's like to grow up autistic, and we want to make the world easier for them to navigate. I included autistic-led resources in the advertisements for you guys to follow. The reason not many people hear about us is because the media tends to ignore disabled people themselves. I would like to say a few things that I wish my parents could have done, which would have changed my life growing up a little bit easier, that I hope can help you. Now, I'm not saying anyone hasn't done these things already, but they're just things that I personally would have benefited from as a child. So firstly, I cannot stress this enough. Encourage your child to follow their special interests and turn it into a passion. If they love trains, encourage them to become an expert on them and work on trains as an adult. If they love art, turn it into a daily activity and encourage them to show their work at art exhibitions and sell them. Whatever it is they enjoy doing, zero in on that and get them to turn it into something that they can devote their life to. This may seem difficult, but try to teach them cues that they may have trouble understanding. My father didn't know how to teach me to understand people and make friends, which is a huge disservice. Teach them nonverbal cues, how to understand sarcasm when someone shows a lack of interest, or how to keep a conversation going. That is, if they can speak. If they can't speak, I would get them access to an AAC device as early as possible. Speech and occupational therapists are expert on that. And do not make them ashamed for being themselves. If they flap their hands, make noises, watch wheels spin, rock back and forth, those are all natural. It's called stimming, which is how we regulate our bodies. For me personally, when I'm happy, I'll flap my hands and make noises, sometimes slapping my chest because the excitement just rushes through my body. Conversely, if I'm upset, I'll smack my head and remove myself from wherever I am. If your child does that, punishing them would only upset them more. Instead, ask them what's bothering them and let them communicate it in whatever way works best for them, whether it's on an iPad, through a drawing, or pointing at things. Autistic people are always communicating, even if it isn't through words. Make them feel like they're always being listened to. Oftentimes I acted out because I felt ignored or like I wasn't being listened to. Now, as I said earlier, be direct. Don't beat around the bush. Say what you mean and be consistent with your words. I and a lot of other autistic people I know are great at spotting patterns. When you do something that deviates from your overall pattern of what you say and do, it could be distressing. It can make us lose trust in the person. If you have trouble being consistent, writing everything down can be helpful. Also, being direct, I'm the type of person who needs to be told that the person loves me in order for me to believe it. If they're upset, try to show as much compassion as possible, even during frustrating moments. When I've been upset and cried, my parents would shame me for crying, which just made it worse. If they had just given me hugs and assured me that everything would be okay and that there's nothing wrong with crying, it would have made me feel a lot better. Now, be very mindful of schools. Teachers can be incredibly discriminatory depending on where it is, and if your child comes home upset, then it's probably what happened in school. It sounds pretty obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've come home distressed from school and my parents would be completely oblivious to it. I just wanted them to pay attention to it and ask me what was wrong because I didn't know how to communicate it. And if I did tell them, I was ignored. Ask your child how school was and get them to be open by assuring them that you're there for them and will do anything to make them feel better. Next, make things predictable for them. If plans change, let them know well in advance. Even as an adult, if plans change, that can certainly affect how the rest of my day goes. Sometimes a visual schedule can help them to know what's coming next throughout the day. If they have trouble keeping friends, I suggest having play dates with other autistic or neurodivergent children. Neurodivergent means anyone who has conditions that fit under neurodiversity, the ones I listed earlier. Odds are a neurodivergent person would understand your child way better than a neurotypical one. Of course, I'm not suggesting you keep them away from neurotypical children, but if they have trouble getting along with them, neurodivergent children are always there for potential new friends. If your child melts down and gets stressed, I suggest giving them their favorite STEM toys or anything that makes them feel comfortable. For example, my friend, who has a son that is non-speaking with high support needs, has outfitted his room with bubble lamps that are visually stimulating for him to look at, which calms him down. He also has a lot of weighted stuffed animals and weighted blankets, as pressure makes him feel comfortable and regulated. If it is possible, let children take the lead sometimes. By that, I mean, if they want to go for a walk, follow their lead and walk with them. If they want to dress a certain way, as long as it's appropriate, let them express themselves. As Dr. Barry Prezant, a speech and language pathologist that I know, would suggest, instead of imposing external control, it is essential to offer the child choices, to give them a voice in planning schedules, activities, and significant aspects of their lives. Having some degree of control over our lives and bodies makes us feel safe and at ease. For me, there is nothing worse than your parents deciding that the type of car you'll have, the subjects you take in school, and where to celebrate your graduation. My parents controlled all of those things and made me very dependent on them as an adult. If you want your children to develop independence in adulthood, giving them a sense of choice will make that a lot easier. Now, I hope all that helped. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Even if I can't answer a specific question, I know many advocates with many more years of experience than myself who I can refer you to. Any questions?
This is Diane. Am I able to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you so much. That was so informative and educational. I'm an instructor at Pegasus, and I really loved hearing, a real life, real time story. So what are you doing now as an adult? Do you have a job? Do you have hobbies? I'm just curious.
Yes, thank you for asking. I am currently doing freelance as a journalist, and I currently live with my friend in Washington State. She let me live in her spare room with her 2 kids. They're all autistic, and we
Wow.
know each other from the neurodiversity community. So I'm currently looking for full-time work for the time being.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem.
Hello, Sebastian.
Hello.
Hi, this is Deborah. Could you talk a little bit about your path now to finding some employment?
Yes. So because I got a degree, like I kind of am going down it the same way everybody else does, just applying and doing the best I can. I've gotten my resume like redone multiple times by professionals to help out a little bit. I've also been doing like more and more freelance to get myself experience, because here's the thing about college, what I didn't mention before. Like, because I need to be told things in order to know them, if it's not like an obvious thing. Like, I didn't know that you needed experience to get like journalism work after college. So after college, like I was scrambling and figuring out what to do. So I've just been doing freelance as much as I can till I could secure a full-time position. So that's what I'm trying to do now.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Sebastian. My name is Barry. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I notice you have a lot of CDs behind you, and I'm wondering, is music something that is helpful for you, and is that generally helpful for a lot of other autistic people?
Yes, music is very calming for me. Like my stim toys tend to be a little more soothing than music is, but it's still fun to just focus. And also I play bass. It's in the background there. Not sure if you see it, but yeah, like those are actually my DVDs back there, but I have my CDs right here. Like I got a whole shelf of them.
That's great.
Yeah.
You can see you really enjoy that.
I do, yes. Music is one of my biggest passions besides advocacy and video games.
Hi, can I ask a question? My name's Dawn.
Absolutely.
Wonderful presentation, very insightful, and appreciate your honesty. Since you're saying that you're a journalist, have you ever thought about writing a book about your life experience?
Yeah, like that's a good question. I never thought about writing one, like an autobiography about myself, because I wasn't sure how interesting it would be compared to others with similar autobiographies. But I am in the process of writing a novel.
That's great.
Excellent.
Sebastian,
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I've been a therapeutic riding instructor for about 15 years and working with a lot of children with autism. And so I've been to a lot of workshops and clinics and a lot of education. But you're speaking just now, everything that you said, I feel like a deeper understanding already, because this has never been explained to me in the way that you just explained it. And I really want to thank you for your honesty. And I can't tell you, this is like amazing to me. It's the questions I always wonder about. And you being honest and just sharing that. Thank you so much. It's more beneficial than any of the workshops I've done from people that think they know because they've educated themselves, because you've experienced it. And that's really, thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. It's been an honor. I probably would not have been able to speak like I have if I didn't write everything down.
I have a question. I'm Hannah.
Hello.
My question is like, how do you deal with your anxiety? I have anxiety and it's really like hard to deal with. So how do you deal with it?
It's a great question. Usually for me, I work best alone with when I have anxiety. So usually, like if I'm anxious, I'll go into my room, put my noise canceling headphones on, play music or watch YouTube or play my bass. That's usually what works for me. Obviously, it's different for everyone, but that's how I do it.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hi, Sebastian. I'm Jeff. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. So I'm going to actually see if my camera works. I just got it fixed. Hey, how's it going?
Good. You?
So I've been in quarantine for like 12 days and I'm going crazy here. And I'm really fascinated by your perspective. And I wanted to know, do you feel like animals are helpful? Horses, you know, some of the things that we do at Pegasus?
Absolutely. Animals are also another passion of mine. Like growing up, I never got to have animals around because my stepmom doesn't like animals. So I would take every opportunity I could to spend time with animals. Like my friend who I live with actually has 2 dogs that I play with a lot and 2 cats. So it's
Excellent.
very soothing for me.
Excellent. And do you feel like you can speak and reach other people that are on different parts of the spectrum?
Yes, I absolutely think so. Now that you ask, would you mind if I told you a little story about that?
I'd love to
Please.
hear a story.
Okay, so like I'm not going to give names just because we both agreed that to keep it private, but like I will tell you the actual story of what happened. So there's this board member of an organization that whose values kind of oppose what the neurodiversity movement is looking for. And she like challenges self-advocates to meet with her and her son, who is intellectually disabled and high support needs, to kind of prove that we're not like her son, basically. And I wanted to meet with them to just bond with her son and get to know him and see if maybe there are similarities between us. And when I met him, like I introduced myself, and like the kid, he like jumped back because like he was nervous because I was a new person, and he has very minimal speech. And like I asked his mother like what snacks he liked, and she said he liked Reese's and Gatorade. So I got it for him and I offered it to him, and that made him like trust me more easily. And we just went on a hike, and we were just hiking around the hills, and it came to a point where he like grabbed my shoulders and pressed his face into mine, like making a sound, and then he like pulled back. And instead of reacting, I just stood there and allowed him because I didn't perceive him as a threat. I knew he wasn't going to hurt me. So I just let him do his thing, and then he just, kept walking. And there would be times where we would walk together and flap our hands together and stim. And also like he needed like help walking up the hill. So I gave him my hand, and he trusted me and took my hand. And
Wow.
we went up, and we also held hands at times. And then at the very end, like when I said goodbye, I asked, could I have a hug? And then he gave me a hug. He like had to think about it slowly. And then he gave me a hug and gave me a smooch on the mask. So like I think I definitely surprised the mom because she had never met like another autistic advocate who can speak and do a lot of things, but who can bond with her son. And I feel like from that moment on, I realized this is definitely like my calling.
That's wonderful. Wow. I hope like when the COVID's over, we could get you to come to Pegasus. We do a
Yeah.
lot of like Liz is like one of the best instructors. We do all kinds of like things to try to figure out how we can support people,
Definitely. I did move to Washington State last month, but if I'm ever back in New York, I definitely can stop by.
Okay.
Love to see you again.
Definitely. Thank you.
Sebastian, I have just something I want to ask you about because you've mentioned it a couple times. And it's funny, I'm actually feeling a little guilty now because I've had a lot of students that, we were through the parents as well, what they felt to try and like reduce any stimming that was happening by saying things like quiet hands. And in doing that, in an effort to be, socially appropriate or whatever, we were really taking away their ability to self-calm or regulate. And that's like devastating to me because there was a lot of that. And I always wondered myself, like, do you want to try and stop that behavior? And clearly by what you're saying, no, that you don't want to. And too bad if people around don't like it, right?
Yeah, I can tell you if I was allowed to flap my hands and stim and stuff, I would have been a much, much happier person growing up. So quiet
Wow.
hands is a little bit counterproductive from what I've heard from other autistic people and myself growing up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, it's Paula from London.
Hey, Paula.
Hey, I just wanted to say about what you were just saying about stimming and stuff. I find it really insulting when my son went through ABA and they tried to stop him from stimming. He was non-verbal till he was 7, and he used to vocally stim, which made him a target for bullies. So he used to get hit and beat quite a lot to try and shut him up. Yeah. So I don't agree with I think it's really important to let people stim. He began by stimming in circles. Then he used to hand flap. And then he started vocally stimming. So he's had various types of stimming. But I realised from a very early age he was diagnosed at 3.5 because he was non-verbal. Obviously, they picked up on it quite quickly. I realised how important it was to let him just be, and to let him stim, and it was healthy. So I completely agree with that. I don't agree with happy hands or stopping people from, whatever it's called. I don't agree with any of those interventions. They're not healthy.
Thank you for sharing that.
He's a much happier child and growing into a much happier teenager because of it. So, I think you need to let people be themselves. And as you said, any interest that they have, encourage those interests, music, history, politics, trains, encourage that into something that they could possibly do in the future as a job, working with animals. I own a farm. I grew up with horses. My granddad was a horse breeder. It wasn't until my son was diagnosed that me and my partner, my son's father, found out that we were both autistic as well. So we found out quite late in life that we were autistic, and I was ADHD as well. So I had to go through life, and so did his daddy, masking. So I really do understand the importance of just being allowed to be yourself and be authentic, you know?
Yes.
That's it. And music played a massive role in my life. It pretty much saved my life, and writing, you know, that was my you know, that was my self-regulation, my, you know, self-soother, which I happened to make into a career and was very successful, traveled the world doing it. So it wasn't a bad thing. But when I look back, having to mask for all of those years and not even realizing that I was masking, I was just trying to fit into everyone's, you know, normality. I look back and I regret the wasted years, but they made me who I am today. So, you know, and it makes me a better parent to my child. It makes me more accepting. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has any other questions?
I have one. My younger grandson, who's abroad, lives abroad. He, I don't really know what he's actually diagnosed with, but in the autistic spectrum, do you have a highly intelligent? He has a very highly IQ, and finds schools, main schools, the teachers just don't get him. And whenever I've seen him, I've always had to say, Lukey, may I give you a hug? He's verbal, and he knows 3 languages, but he's doing online schooling now. He was in a private school, but the teachers were all stupid and, you know, didn't get him, and very few could really understand where he's coming from. So his parents are really being, I think, very good in trying to encourage things that he might like. Is that a part of us? Do you think I don't know that he's been completely diagnosed as autistic, or some kind of, you know, situation. Do you find that you have a very high intelligence in maybe some area or whatever?
High intelligence, some area, yes. Like when it comes to my special interests, I could dive into it and just know everything about it. Growing up, I always had like an encyclopedic knowledge of like video games, comic books, movies, and just pop culture in general. And I would just, and music too. And I would always just spout facts. Even to this day, I'll just spout random facts about music that nobody knows.
Wow. Yeah, he's into music, and certainly the you know, video games and whatnot. So
Sebastian, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know a little bit about like scripting? Right?
Scripting, you mean like when you kind of rehearse what you're saying?
Well, I've had like participants that will say lines in movies, like
Yes,
complete the
yes.
movie, like over and over, and is that a soothing thing for them, or even the echolaic speech? Is that like a self-soothing thing as well? Because
Yes.
it seems like the more anxious, the more that comes.
Yes, because
Scripting.
autistic people like need familiarity. A lot of times that's what we resort to are those familiar phrases that we've heard. Like as
Okay.
I said, growing up, like I spoke only in echolalia till I was like 8 because that's what was comfortable for me, just repeating those lines. And today, if I just don't know what else to say, I'll kind of recycle the same phrases because that's what I know.
Okay.
My son is the same, yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Hi, Sebastian. This is Donna. I
Hey,
have a
Donna.
question. Yeah,
Yes.
I have a 19-year-old granddaughter who's on the spectrum. My question, high anxiety. My question is, she doesn't, when she shuts down, she does not always is able to find the words to tell you what's wrong. How do you have any strategies on helping somebody work through that when they're not able to receive anything from you at that time?
Yes, that's a good question. What I would do if it was me, like give them at least a few hours. And if they still don't respond, have them write it out, like write it on a piece of paper in their own space, in their own time, and let them communicate that way. As I said before, let them communicate in whatever way feels best for them.
Yeah, what happens if they're so rigid that that avenue isn't available to them? Because I have done that, and sometimes it takes days to get that out.
Mm. Yeah,
And
that
you
is
don't
a
always
tough
have
one.
that time.
Right. Well, if it's something urgent, really the only solution would be to have them communicate in whatever ways possible. And if they still don't do it, I'm not really sure, only because I've never like been in a shutdown for that long. Um, yeah, what I would do is reach out to Emma Dalmain of Autistic Inclusive Meets. She has a lot more experience in those areas.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll be able to find her on Facebook or go to the Autistic Inclusive Meets Facebook page.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
No problem.
Sebastian, I have another question. Sorry to keep asking you questions.
Mhm.
Did you ever have, eye contact we find is sometimes a thread with people with autism? Did you have difficulty with eye contact, and what is it helpful to try and ask for a little bit of eye contact to sort of get that kind of going, or just not ask for that? I mean, did you have any issues with eye contact with people?
Yes, I actually remember like it started when I was about 3 years old. I remember my cousin asking me, "Why aren't you making eye contact?" And because I didn't know how to communicate that, I just didn't say anything. And yes, even today, I still don't make eye contact just because it's very uncomfortable. It feels like a burning feeling when I look in people's eyes. And honestly, I believe that it really shouldn't be that important. Like,
Right.
as long as you're like using other modes of like nonverbal communication, like nodding your head or like restating what they said back to them, like that acknowledges that you're still listening. But I don't think making eye contact should have to be done just to reassure that person that you're listening. There are always other ways of doing that.
I see the parents actually do it a lot. Like, they'll say, "Oh, tell Liz thank you, look at her." And I feel, and it kind of breaks my heart because I know sometimes it's uncomfortable for me as well, eye contact. So
Mhm.
it's probably, like that. And I do find that parents a lot are pushing for that eye contact because maybe they feel like that's communication or connection that they're looking for their children to have. But it's interesting the way you explain that, to how uncomfortable it is.
Yeah, because it's like expected to be normal. But
Right.
in some cultures, like some cultures in Africa, for example, they don't make eye contact at all because it's seen as being disrespectful.
Right.
So it's more of like a cultural thing than anything else, you know? Like I think you shouldn't have to follow society's standards to live a happy life. It should be about making yourself happy more than anything else.
Thank you.
If anyone has
I
any
have
other
another,
questions.
I have another question. Do you have a Facebook page or
I do,
any
yes.
place? Okay.
Yeah, what I
Can
can
you
do
share that?
is,
Okay.
yes, let me just go on to my Facebook and I'll get the link for you guys and paste in the chat. How's that?
Good. Because I'd like to share it with some other parents and friends of my daughters that I would love for them to be able to hear you.
Absolutely.
Sebastian, you have a lot to give to people because this really is amazing.
Yeah.
This has been an amazing thing.
Thank you.
Did you ever
Wonderful.
did you ever formally like tape a session like this so that people could go to it on your Facebook page and listen to it?
I never have. This is actually my first time ever speaking to a mass audience of parents.
It's surprising, right, everybody?
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe
Sound
you
like
should,
a pro.
maybe that could be one of your next projects, to work on something that, in other words, if we saw you tonight, we could share with other people that weren't here to listen to you on your Facebook page, or if you have, I'm not up on Twitter and all that others things, but there's got to be a way that your voice can be heard, because it's
People go out.
phenomenal, your life story and what you shared.
Thank you. Yes,
podcast.
like, yes,
YouTube channel, YouTube.
YouTube, that's it.
Yeah,
Do
YouTube,
it.
definitely.
Yep, I pasted my profile onto the chat so everyone can access it. Let me
And
know if you didn't get it.
I'm not sure. I don't mean to be, that you have to do it for me, but maybe I can get it from one of Candace or Liz, because I'm not sure how to find it and I don't want to miss getting it. So maybe I can get it from them offline.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, whatever works. The link is
Okay.
there, and I could also email it to Candace and Liz. Don't matter to me.
I appreciate it.
No problem. And also on the advertisements, like the flyers for the event, are all the links of the other advocates that I pull a lot of my information from and who I keep in close contact with. And they are excellent resources. And all of them have done this years, even decades more than I have. So
Yeah.
they are definitely great people to go to.
It's been very helpful.
Thank
Andrew,
you.
Candace, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm wondering, I don't know if we're recording this. Are we recording this?
Yes, we are.
All right, awesome. Perfect. Sebastian, can you talk a little bit about the terminology that really makes the most sense to you? We spoke about it a little bit when you were at Pegasus. So for everybody listening, we're used to saying, high functioning, low functioning, moderate functioning. It's sort of in the industry and just sort of the language that was seen to be acceptable. But Sebastian definitely taught me a little bit more about that. And I'd love for you to share that with everybody.
Absolutely. So basically, instead of high and low functioning, autistic people see those as outdated terms. So instead, what we use for people like me would be low support needs, meaning like someone who can do a lot of things, while high support needs are people who need a little more help. Like, I believe high and low support needs are much more accurate terms because it pinpoints exactly the needs that they have, while low functioning and high functioning can be very misleading because you could be high functioning and while having a full-time job and having a marriage, but you could have trouble tying your shoes. And on the flip side, there could be a low functioning person who can't talk, but can be one of the best artists you've ever seen. Like, it's very misleading, and low functioning kind of dehumanizes them, while high functioning just disregards their difficulties.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And also, were there any other terms that you need me to explain?
That was I think that was pretty much the main one. That is a really a common term that we were using. And I've already talked to all the instructors, but that's something that you getting the word out to everybody that you can, so that that becomes, you know, more universal as the most respectful term. The minute you said it, it made sense, but I had never heard it before. So
Thank you. I have a lot of mentors that I learned a lot of good things from.
yeah.
Can you repeat something that you said in the very beginning about Asperger's?
Yes, so you wanted to know like why I rejected the term?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So basically, Hans Asperger was a pediatrician in Vienna, Austria, back during World War II, right around when the Nazis took over Austria. And his boss was one of the biggest Nazis in Austria. And Asperger, basically, what he did was he ran a clinic with autistic people. He was basically the guy who discovered autism, although that's technically debatable because Langdon Down, who discovered Down syndrome, also worked with kids who you would describe as autistic today. If you look at his documents, you'll be able to see that. But anyway, Asperger was the first guy to basically categorize autism. He originally called it autistic psychopathy. And basically he had like, you know, he had two groups of autistic people, like ones like me and more people with high support needs. He sent the high support needs people to the Am Spiegelgrund clinic in Germany, which is like a death camp, and he would try to protect the low support needs people. And you know, it's sickening to me because even to this day I see a lot of people who are like looking at low support needs people like they're better than the other autistics, and I don't like to look at it that way. Just because I can drive and do certain things doesn't make me better than any other autistic people, because I've met like non-speaking people who are way better writers than I am. For example, there are things that they can do that I can't. Like the girl that I dated that I talked about, like she was able to keep friendships way easier than I could, for example. You know, everybody's so different. You can't really put them into two little boxes like that, you know?
That's interesting.
Thank you. That is interesting. Never heard or read about that until you just mentioned it.
Yes, how I found out about that was from the book Neurotribes by Steve Silberman. I definitely recommend that book. That was the first neurodiversity book I ever read.
Can you repeat the title, Sebastian?
Yep, Neurotribes by Steve Silberman. I could also write it in here too.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yep.
This is why
There
you
we
need to
go.
write a book.
That's right.
Thank you. Maybe I should one
Yes.
of these days, like an
Yes.
autobiography.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's
I'm enjoying answering everybody's questions, so fire away if anyone else has any.
Adorable.
Hi, can I just speak to Susan?
yes.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Hi. We have something in the UK called PDA.
Yeah.
You mentioned your niece, was it?
No, my grandson.
Your grandson.
Yes.
And you were saying about different diagnostic criterias.
Yes. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have something here, which for the last 10 years, sort of 15 years, being researched. It's not actually gone into the diagnostic criteria yet, but it's definitely on its way. So you would be diagnosed with autism and PDA, which stands for pathological demand avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could just maybe Google that and research that,
Okay.
that may be something of interest.
Okay.
And that may resonate with you know, what you were asking about the different diagnostic criterias.
Okay.
Because America, as far as I'm aware, is only just starting to hold seminars, and in the last year they've had people come over from the UK and
Mhm.
hold seminars on it. It's quite a new thing in the USA as far as I'm aware. So if you want to just Google that, PDA.
PDA, I sure will. Thank you.
What does that stand for again?
Pathological demand avoidance.
He's been, well, let's see. He speaks 3 languages. They live in Switzerland.
Yeah, I mean, they're really highly intelligent, you know.
Yes, yeah, and they went to a French English school in the grade school times. The older brother is now in a regular. He's in the high school.
Yeah.
He's of a Swiss school, which is all in French. And then Lukey, they did send him for 3 years at a St. George's, which was right around the corner from where they lived, which is a English boarding school actually. And so there've been a couple of teachers who have gotten him, but why should I do 20 times something when I know it? And
definitely.
and then he would he wouldn't want to go to certain classes.
Yeah, and he'll avoid.
He'd avoid that, and he was beginning to make friends, but now he's and Jim, my son and daughter-in-law are trying to get him on in a school that's with science and math. I mean, he's 12 years old and he's doing 10th grade math, and and the science and that kind of thing, and they're trying to look at projects. He's very lowly motivated at the moment, and so it's kind of a tough time, but they're trying to understand. They brought him to psychologists and whatnot, so it's been a difficult.
Can I just the environment is so important, to be in the right environment, especially when it comes to education. Or he is just going to be so bored out of his mind, and he's just not going to, as you say, put the effort in.
Exactly. And that's
because you said that he feels like everyone there is stupid.
Well, even some of the teachers, why should I do this?
No, that's what struck me. He sounds quite PDA to me, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Google that.
I will.
And the National Autistic Society, they have a page on PDA, and then the PDA Society probably is the best place to look.
Okay, perfect.
You know, to gain information and background, and it will either resonate or it won't. I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, we'll see. What happens. I mean, there's certain things he's enthusiastic about. He loves cooking and he loves gardening and stuff like that. So, but also the sciences and the math and whatnot is
if everything has to be on his terms, then it could be PDA.
Okay, that's kind of
which is a part of autism,
Yeah, I think so. Have you heard of that, Sebastian?
PDA, yes. Paula, I actually know personally. She taught me a lot about it, and it was pretty interesting to learn. I feel like I may be able to relate to it a little bit myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Paula. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sebastian. This is Barry again.
Hey, Barry.
I have a question. I recently, when I was at Pegasus, was working with a young man, and he seemed to be, from my perspective, and Pegasus doesn't share the diagnoses, so, but he seemed to be like, when he did something that was not right, he would get very frustrated and kind of almost in a way lash out verbally, like say things like, I know what I'm doing, or, don't tell me, and I guess what's the best way to interact with that outburst? Is it just let him have it and then see if he calms down? Or like sometimes what I would just say is, that's all right. That's why we practice. That's why we have instructors, and just kind of let him know, almost like, it's all right to not be perfect. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that actually kind of reminds me of myself as a kid, to be honest. Like, basically, what I would do is just try to take a step back, give him space, let him have the room to himself if he needs it, and just let him do what he needs to do naturally. Sometimes, like, if we have people over our shoulder, like, it just makes us feel more anxious and like ramps us up. So it's probably best if you just let him do it at his own pace and don't rush him. And if he makes a mistake, like, don't fault him for it. Just be like, it's okay. People make mistakes. Just be as
Yeah.
compassionate as possible, even if it is frustrating. You got to keep your cool, because if you don't, then they can't keep their cool. You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's what I try to do, is just, you know, be compassionate and just let him know that, you know, it's all right to not be perfect and to just learn from it.
Yeah. So
Great.
if he needs like space or alone time, he seems like that would probably be best for him, I would think. If I
Well,
could
it's a little
imagine being
hard.
in the room with him.
Yeah, it's a little hard. He's on the horse. So
Oh, okay. I
yeah,
thought
this
you
is
meant
when he,
like when he was sitting down. Okay.
no, when he's on the horse.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then in that sense, just be as calm and try not to like say too much at once. In that
Got you.
sense. Because
Yeah.
if you just keep saying do this, do that, do this, do that, then they're gonna like start like getting overwhelmed. Because
Got you.
that can like overwhelm me. You know, people just keep saying like demand after demand, you know.
I told you how I felt, Liz, from Monday.
You did,
that,
right?
that one time. Do this, do that, do this, do that.
And I know who you're talking about, and I'm so glad you asked the question. Good, Barry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I hope that helps you.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Good.
Lisa, I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, so
I really do, for an ex-special ed teacher, and I did ABA for years and had the most wonderful kids, and I've learned new things right now that we did not know back when I was teaching. I also have a granddaughter who's on the spectrum, and I appreciate everything that you've shared with us, and I can relate to a lot of it, and I think you're great, and I would love to hear more from you in the future.
Yeah.
So everybody, I think we're getting ready to finish up, but I'm going to give a little round of applause here for Sebastian, because that was amazing.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Definitely
Thank you,
gonna hear
everybody.
more from him for sure. So, Sebastian, anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, I would just say stay safe during the pandemic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a
Thank
great
you very
night,
much.
everybody.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Very
Thank
helpful.
Again, that was
Thank you,
amazing.
everyone.
And Liz,
You're
thanks for
welcome.
setting this. Liz and Candace, thanks for setting this up. This was
Yeah.
great.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
Pretty
definitely.
cool, right?
Yeah.
We'll
Very
get
cool.
Sebastian back in person too. Unfortunately, he did just move away, but we'll get him back. And, keep doing this, Sebastian. You have a lot